about goddamn time. Welcome back to Shoot, Punch, Kick, where three friends from Brooklyn work to overcome their rivalries and talk about violent movies from the 80s and 90s. Today, Telly, Carlos, and I are headed to the rooftops to train with Ghost Dog, Way of the Samurai, directed by Jim Jarmusch. How you guys doing today?
What
Great.
up?
Is
Peace,
it
God.
Jarmusch or
Peace
Jarmusch?
to the gods.
I don't know.
I always
Honestly,
heard it as
Jarmusch?
Jarmusch, but I don't know. So maybe
You
they
sound like
pronounce it.
that
Yeah, I don't
that
know.
Key and Peele sketch.
Yeah.
Hey, Aaron.
I could be. So you know what? I'm gonna go with Telly. If he heard it's Jarmusch, I'm gonna side
Yeah.
with Telly
Okay. No,
because
I
I'm
know you
just
guys
like,
are big fans of this movie, so I thought maybe you guys have the
Wow, is
proper
that a shade from you,
pronunciation.
Telly? Are you
Yeah.
questioning
No,
fandom?
I'm deferring to your
Yeah.
fandom. Yeah.
Well, if you were really a fan of Ghost
So
Dog.
well, it turns out I'm a fan of Ghost Dog, but not Jim Jarmusch because
okay.
I looked at his IMDb and the only one that I saw was Coffee and Cigarettes
Yeah, I
because
remember that.
it turns out I'm more of a Wu-Tang fan than than a Jim fan. So I've seen the two of his movies that have the RZA in it,
Mhm.
but none of his other works. Have any of you seen any of his others?
I've seen Mystery Train and Lost in Translation and
I
Coffee and
saw.
Cigarettes, which
No, that
I don't remember very
Same.
much of.
did he do
I
a
didn't see
Lost in
Mystery Train.
Translation? That's not. He's not.
Oh no, sorry, no, he did. No, that was Sofia Coppola. What was I thinking? He did. Or maybe I'm messing it up with this movie. So, sorry. No, I'm messing it up with Mystery Train. Okay, because that
Okay,
was like with some Japanese actors
got it.
and Broken
What about
Flowers.
you?
Oh, so this is my man. I'm turning into Biden. Yeah, he did Broken Flowers with Bill Murray, and then he did Mystery Train with some Japanese
Got it.
characters. So I just mushed them all together, and that's exactly what happened with me and Ghost Dog, because I thought I saw it and I didn't. I was thinking of another Forest Whitaker movie where he plays a hitman.
Black Panther. Got you.
The Black Panther.
To get the
Um,
power of the Black Panther stripped away.
stripped away. The Black. He doesn't even say black. He says the Black. Um,
He was acting,
so
boy.
he was acting his ass off. So for me, I'm just looking now at his filmography, and the only movie I've even heard of is Coffee and Cigarettes in this thing, and of
Okay.
course Ghost Dog. So
Yeah.
yeah, no.
I feel like overall, this is probably, this is before A24, but I feel like this was like my first real like indie art movie. Like, the
Mhm.
kind of movie that has Finn at the
Mhm.
end. Um, I really like that about this movie. Like when I watched it initially as a kid, because this is, a lot of the movies that we're talking about, I was much younger. So like The Crow,
Yeah.
I was 10. This is a movie that I was like around junior high school. So this
You know, I,
definitely
I,
introduced me to a new genre.
I'm really interested when you say that though, because we watch B movies all the time.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious about why you would call this. What's the difference between an independent film like this that you're giving this the credit to, and just like a B movie that we watch, which were basically the independent films of the '80s? Like,
Well, I think
what's the difference?
those are more I would call them low budget versus independent because a lot of them were through studios. So like,
Mm,
they were very cheaply made, but they weren't made with the idea of the way like Reservoir Dogs was, where it was like, oh, this director and lone producer raised enough money to shoot something on like a 16
Yeah,
millimeter.
yeah,
oh,
Carlos.
okay, that
I
was
guess it
Weinstein.
depends on how you want to define a B movie and an independent
Independent.
movie, because most
Mhm.
Yeah.
legitimate B movies are done outside of the studio system. So technically they're independent. But I think when we talk about independent movies, we mean films that go to film festivals with like directors that get like positive reviews in the New York Times versus something like
Okay.
Maniac Cop 2, you know?
The way that the movie plays out was unlike the B movies that we saw. They followed a big Hollywood formula of like, trimming the fat, big action pieces. The ones that I like, those kind of B
Mm,
movies, where I thought that this
okay.
one was very subdued in a lot of the way that you would think of your like IFC theater
Yeah.
movies that would, have like a random screening on a Sunday.
Yeah, my
Gotcha.
favorite types of films are those independent movies that intersect with sort of a B movie. So you have like the character study, good direction, but you also have some of those cheap thrills that you get. I think Nicholas Winding Refn was talking about that. He called it like art exploitation or something like
Hmm.
that. That's how he categorized Drive. And also because he said that during the director's commentary for Maniac Cop 2, where there's some artistic integrity, but it's
Hmm.
also not necessarily trying to be an art film, and but it's not purely an exploitation movie.
Well, I feel like this movie gets into a balance of them. So let's talk about the movie, and just to catch everyone up to speed, we're going to be checking out the gods over at ChatGPT to give us a synopsis of the movie. So, Ghost
Oh
Dog: The
hell,
Way
I
of the
started to
Sam.
make overtoss. Sorry, gotta get in there.
Hell yeah. Ghost Dog, The Way of the Samurai follows Ghost Dog, a hitman who lives by the samurai code as described in the Hagakure. He works for Louis, a low level mobster, communicating through carrier pigeons. After a hit goes wrong, the mob targets Ghost Dog to cover their tracks. The film explores themes of loyalty, honor, and the clash between ancient samurai principles and modern life. The unique blend of samurai philosophy, hip hop culture, and existential themes is enhanced by a soundtrack from RZA of the Wu Tang Clan. So that's Ghost
That's
Dog, according to ChatGPT.
pretty on point. It wasn't heavy on plot points, but
Yeah.
thematically, it was pretty. It's one of the more on point ones that I think we've had.
Yeah, no AI hallucinations there.
Where did you guys see Ghost Dog for the first time?
I remember it coming out in the '90s, and I was familiar with Forest Whitaker, and also familiar with Jim Jarmusch, but for whatever reason, I didn't it didn't compel me to go to the movie theater or watch it on home video. So this was a first time watch for me.
This is the intersection. I was exactly the person they made this movie for. So
Hmm.
I heard about it coming out. I knew about it way in advance. I was super excited. I was living in Florida at the time, but I had come down in '99 to visit New York for the summer. And so some of my friends went to a theater in the village and we watched there. And then when I loved it so much that I came back and I brought the DVD. Was it a DVD? The DVD at the time. And showed it to everybody when I got back to school. I was the one who like introduced everybody at college to this movie. I was a big stand for this movie. Having said that, I haven't seen it in maybe 15 years, so
Yeah.
this is like first time seeing it. I feel like with more adult eyes.
Well, I've seen it throughout. This is one of those movies that I had on multiple formats. I had it on tape. I had it on DVD when I worked at Hollywood Video, and then I was surprised to see this as a Criterion movie because I feel like this is
Prestige.
something. Yeah, this is a movie that I wish that I would want to see on the Criterion. Like sometimes a movie will catch me off guard, like Deep Cover being on there. I'm like, oh shit, I'm surprised that that made the cut. But I
Yeah.
think that
Yeah.
this is a good movie to kind of represent hip hop and a collection that's kind of lacking in urban movies, I would say.
Well, the Breakfast Club has a Criterion edition now, so I think they're widening
It-
their selection.
Lower in the bar. So, what do you overall? What did you guys think about the story of this movie? It's a big mashup of a lot of genres. Obviously, you have the samurai theme, you have a mob movie, you have a lot of independent aesthetics, art film, pacing, interstitials, voiceover, a lot of the hallmarks of an indie movie. Overall, tying it together, what did you think about the story of a black hitman who lives his life by the samurai code, who works for mobsters who operate out of a Chinese restaurant in the tri-state area?
So for me, since this was a first time watch, first couple of minutes, I couldn't get it out of my head. Was I was just thinking of The Last Dragon, which I grew up with watching a million times on Channel 11. It's a black martial arts movie where the main character acts like a Chinese kung fu student. Um, and I was just thinking, like, I just kept comparing the two, and for me, my taste definitely leaned more towards like what they were doing in The Last Dragon, because I definitely, this is not a movie I did not, I can't say I love this movie, because there were just a lot of things that I wasn't sure what Jim Jarmusch was going for. So I love to discuss it with both of you since you're much bigger fans of this movie. But in terms of tone and just having fun with that concept and kind of pushing it as far as they can go in a cinematic way. Um, yeah, I was just a little confused at what was trying to be accomplished with this movie. Compare it to other similar movies with
Mhm.
similar themes.
Um, it's an interesting comparison. For me, the comparison when watching this movie again, kind of with fresh eyes, but not so much, was The Professional. I kind of see this more as um, a comparison can be made with this in The Professional way more than The Last Dragon. I think just because The Last Dragon was didn't really take itself seriously. I get the music video comparison that you're going for here, Telly. Um, a movie that kind of styles itself in a lot of ways to the music and the music video style, but the style of music that The Last Dragon was trying to kind of follow after is a more like funny, doesn't really take itself too seriously style of like party music, where if this is going to be kind of like a music video, it's going to be more of a hip hop. And again, it makes a total sense when you consider the RZA and the Wu Tang, a Shogun Assassin being a huge inspiration. Like we were the intersection again that this movie was made for. If you loved hip hop, if you loved the specific type of hip hop that followed along with martial arts movies and Asian cinema, this was, and you loved mob movies, like again, I think The Godfather for me, it's not my favorite movie, but I think it's like the best movie. Um, for us, it was the perfect intersection of those things. So I think the idea is a great idea. It seems like it's a really interesting concept. How it was delivered, I think, has changed for me over time. The way the plot was delivered, but the idea and the concept, I think, are really great and intriguing. And I think it's maybe the presentation that I had some more issues with. So, story and plot wise, I love the idea, and I still think it's an interesting concept. To your
Yeah, I
question.
think for me, a lot of these things had that Matrix effect, and it was funny talking to Telly about the Matrix during our Dark City episode because he was saying like, oh, a lot of these concepts from the Matrix he was already exposed to. And for me, a big selling point of the Matrix was like, oh shit, here are all these really new things for me
Concepts.
to dive into. And with the movie like this being a mashup of name drops of a lot of different books from Frankenstein, Rashomon. I haven't seen it, but people say that Le Samurai was a big influence on this movie, and a lot of things were taken from it. For me, at 99 2000 when we started to open up the internet, this movie was kind of like a not a time capsule, but it was like one body of work that put me on to a lot of different things. So it had different people in the soundtrack alone that I was looking for from just the Wu Tang angle. I liked Shaw Brothers movies and kung fu movies, but I wasn't that versed in like samurai movies. So I had to get used to that like slow pacing of Ghost Dog because it does play out like a samurai movie, which a lot of people who like the John Woo, who like Shaw Brothers and Jackie
Right.
Chan, aren't really into the slow, deliberate pacing of
It's like Shogun
the
Assassin more
Yeah,
than
yeah.
the Five Deadly Venoms.
And
yeah,
I
and
think with this one, it used a lot of that pacing to set up a big rogues gallery of mobsters and side characters and friends of this little pocket of the city. And I really like the little world that this set up with, like, where they had the Chinese guy who was carrying
And they
his
kick the
groceries,
shit.
and he fights, and you have this implied world where you could be a samurai, you could be no karate in the streets. I think early in the movie it set up a promise of a really like fantastical world
yeah,
that I did appreciate. What did
and
you guys think of the setting?
yeah, well, that's why it made me think of Last Dragon because it was this sort of like not quite realistic world and people that don't quite act like normal human beings reacting to all this like weird fantastical stuff going around them. I thought from a setting standpoint, it had that '90s like indie movie grit. It was shot. I did some reading. They
Newark,
said they shot it mostly in Jersey
Jersey
City
City. Yeah,
before. I know Jersey City is like
before
totally
it
gentrified
gentrified.
now. Yeah, but I really like that because that's an area that you definitely don't see a lot in movies, and that sort of like working class New York City adjacent areas. But yeah, but I think what you mentioned, Dash, was certainly correct. Where you're sometimes your perception of a movie is muddled by just sort of other movies that you've seen, and you start comparing it to that. So again, I just couldn't get Last Dragon on my head, and I'm a huge fan of Hitman movies as well.
Mm.
And so it just didn't quite do that for me. And also around this time, I was also getting into Beat Takashi a lot, who did sort of modern day quote unquote samurai movies within the
Yeah.
Yakuza context. So it just made me think of that a lot. But I thought but it did capture sort of that again, that '90s or inner city setting. I thought was done brilliantly.
Have you seen Brother with B. Takeshi and Omar Epps?
Yes.
Speaking of a black,
Right.
somewhat yakuza movie.
Um, yeah, so I think the world for me, the world building is one of the things I've most fell in love with. Again, I feel like I'm not sure how much the RZA say had on the way this movie was both filmed and directed, but I feel like the way, just how you're speaking, how it's like these odd characters would be odd on their own, but they seem to coalesce into this world and all individually fit in. Right? You got the black samurai, you got the French guy who owns an ice cream truck, and they don't really understand each other, but somehow they actually always understand each other, right? And then you also, the comparison of, he's walking down the street and like the RZA comes and sees him, and like no one's really afraid of him. They just, oh, that's Ghost Dog. He has no friends, but he's part of this community. Makes
Yeah.
sense. And for me, it was very reminiscent. I think of like the Wu Tang themselves as a band, because again, it's this combination of like, all these different personalities that they all kind of share Shaolin or Staten Island as a home, but they all interact in it very differently, even though they're all part of the same community. So I think that the world that it created for me, I didn't realize, I didn't really think about the world until you guys started talking about it just now, just because for me it always fit in with, it just felt like if I was watching a Wu-Tang video, right? Like this is the, when I put on, liquid swords and I'm walking down the street, I am Ghost Dog when I put those headphones in and I'm listening to, the Purple Tape, right? In my head, as I'm walking down the street, I'm Ghost Dog, and all these people around me play these odd characters in my world. So I didn't really consider it. I never really considered it in terms of the world it creates, because I just feel like it was so comfortable for me just being mired in those movies and that music from the time. Again, being the demographic that this was specifically geared towards. So I absolutely love it. And it's funny too. One of the things I did was, if you look at the cars, it's just a weird thing I do sometimes, where if they don't tell you where a movie is filmed or supposed to be set, then I'll try to look at street signs, or
Yeah.
I'll try to look at license plates. And so I was watching this with my mom actually the other day, which is funny. It was her first time seeing it, and we paused it, and the license plate said the Industrial Straight. So
Yeah.
that sounds like, a nickname that, like, like Florida's the Sunshine State, right? So we looked it up, and apparently there is no state that is the industrial state. According to what I read, Jarmusch was trying to set up that where this takes place isn't important. It could happen in any neighborhood in any state in the world. And so he was kind of going for some, although it seems crazy and mystical to us, this world, surprisingly, I think he was going for a realism, like this could be anywhere USA.
So I think one of the things that really works with the movie is the mix of a lot going on frame at the same time. So you have that city and you have the mafia. What did you guys think of Ghost Dog? First off, what did you think of Ghost Dog as a whole? I definitely get the comparisons with The Professional. Very stoic to himself, clean killer, but what did you think of
With a kid.
him? Yeah, him. How he reacts with other people, the whole pigeon stuff, training on his roof with a crazy sequence.
Telly, you want to
Were
go
you
ahead?
buying it?
I was just curious at one point in the movie, like maybe halfway through, was I wasn't sure how serious we should take him. Like, is this guy just nuts? And because I live I'm in New York, downtown New York. I see people like that all the time that think they're martial arts masters and they're like, on crack and stuff, so I wasn't at one point. I was, because obviously Forrest Whitaker is not a swordsman or trained in anything like that. So, and it's very obvious when you get non-martial artists trying to perform stuff. And so I'm like wondering, like, are we maybe he's just a guy that's like a little off his rocker and thinking he's a samurai and a martial arts master, um, are we supposed to take this seriously? And I don't think the movie, at least for me, it didn't quite answer that. If you take away all the interstitials, there's nothing in the that he does in the movie that suggests he's any sort of samurai master.
Okay, I think I take an opposite track to that. I feel like it's kind of by design, right? So Forrest Whitaker seems crazy in this world, but I feel like that's a theme in the movie is that, and they said it many times throughout the film, ancient Japan was a weird place, right? So it seems weird for him to be in a neighborhood, a modern day neighborhood, acting the way that he acts by following the code of the samurai, but that's by nature. There's no way that he could be following the code of the samurai and not seem crazy in this world. So, I mean, yes, absolutely. I agree with you about he's not really a martial artist per se. I think they tried and failed to do this analog with the gun kind of being the sword,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where he had that funny sheathing method, which I think wasn't cool enough to emote what it was trying to emote. But I think that he played the character well. I couldn't imagine anybody else playing this kind of stoic, guy in the again the whole concept of him and who he is weird, right? He's a black kid from a project who follows the code of the samurai,
But that's
right?
what's really dope about, especially living through the mafia, who
Mm-hmm.
also is
Or another
presented,
tribe.
and
Yeah.
they're presented in just as a ridiculous manner. So you see them like arguing with the children.
Mm-hmm.
They're operating while the Chinese restaurant is open. So you see
Hmm.
them like making food, and they're doing these like ridiculous ceremonies. But I love their reaction
It's
to
the
every
poetry of
level.
war.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but they're like, wait a minute, he's
With a pigeon.
first off, he's a black dude and he has a pigeon. And I love that even in this world, it's ridiculous. But I think that the relationship between Ghost Dog and Louie is cool because you really have these solo people that are kind of isolated by the city around them. And I think like an artsy movie like this, where you're not diving into the a lot is left unsaid, which really gives it this like dreamlike portrayal of you're not really sure where everyone else lands in the ridiculousness of this. But his relationship with Louis, of having a pigeon show up every morning and not being like what the fuck is going on, is really telling, but does create a kind of, all right, I'm on board with this movie. Where is this going to go? Because
I think it's
this
also
is
kind
Yeah,
of
ridiculous.
telling
I think
too.
one of my issues with the characterization is because they have the flashback, and I know why they had the flashback, and I know they're conflicting stories.
Versions.
But because you had essentially two flashbacks, and that's shown like multiple times. I'd rather have been a pure mystery, and I think some of the best Hitman movies, they don't really delve into backstory. It's a lot of it's implied and suggested, whereas this is very explicit. So that's where I was reading into the fact that maybe this guy might be a little nuts, and not that that's important, but when
But
in the
maybe he
flashback
is.
he's wearing like a shirt, and he's like obviously into like Asian or Japanese culture or something like that. So maybe this was like a manga anime fan that kind of took his obsession a little too far. But I just wish that was completely out of the movie so that we could kind of try to infer what's the history between these two people.
I mean, I
Mm.
think also a major theme in like the Asian film cinema with these samurai movies. Although he's not specifically a Ronin because he does have a master, a lot of the films portray samurai as being loners, right? Like it's a lonely road that they walk, killing. And I think even some of the excerpts from the book is, that you're alone, right? And so I don't know. To me, it made sense that he was a loner and strange because that's kind of the point was that he's I don't want to say a fish out of water, but then they also said like you can't in one of the passages it says something about you can't hold on to the essence of an age because the age
Mhm.
is going to die, right? And so I think the theme behind that is that he is trying to live by a code of an age that no longer exists. And to some degree, even the mafia's code doesn't exist because, even though they're supposed to be following a code, you see at every opportunity they are going against that code as well. And so I think it was important for them. I think you're right, Anthony, to show the dichotomy. At the end of the day, they both come from he doesn't really come from a tribe, but he's following the code of an old school tribe with a set of values that doesn't really exist anymore, which
Mhm.
kind of limits him. But the same thing with the mob, the original kind of mob dictates a certain code of ethics that no one really followed anymore, just because it's not efficient if no one else is also following that code.
And
Um,
also too, I mean, the mob in this is portrayed in a way they're down on their rent, right? Like they're having money problems. The kids don't respect them, and I think that this movie does a interesting job of portraying a lot of stereotypical things in a little bit of a different light. Of especially being one out of time, but also just out of place, and everything just feels a little bit off. And I felt like the mafia gave a light-hearted beat to the movie that it needed. I think that Forrest Whitaker was so stoic and dry and down, and I don't and it was intentional. I don't mean that in a negative way, but I thought the scenes with the mafia had a lot of comedic value to a movie that could have just been very dry and
I
and
mean,
bland.
come on, you had a mob boss rapping Fight the Power. Was it Fight the Power? It was
Yeah, it
it
was a
wasn't Run
Flavor
DMC.
Flav. It was a Flavor
Flavor
Flav
Flav
song,
Flav.
Yeah.
and so we have some
It's
we have some
awesome.
familiar faces of Henry Silva. We got
Hmm.
Victor Argo, and we have a handsome Frank who, in my opinion, wasn't too handsome. I
He
like
was the most
the
handsome out of all of them, though.
I
Compare,
like the I
compare.
like the banter with the mafia, and
Mm.
I thought that they were a good backdrop of people that you would see killed for the duration of the movie.
Shout out to I caught just very vaguely in the background. Jamie Hector, I think is his name. He was Marlowe from The Wire.
Yeah,
I caught him in the background. I thought that was a good shout out. And I really and also the little girl, which I think she was the girl uh,
Bernie, the Bernie
from the Bernie
show.
Mac show. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um, she was okay, I thought, but I also really liked the interaction between Ghost Dog and the French ice cream truck owner.
mhm.
That guy again, uh, even though you don't understand exactly what he's saying. I mean, I think I took a little French in high school, but not enough that I could use that as a way to understand what he's saying. But I still feel like I could understand why Ghost Dog would understand pretty much everything he was saying, even without understanding the language.
Mhm.
And so I really thought he was great. But yeah, I think Henry Silva was. I feel like he has reached such a status of villain status and usually like mob boss status that people think his mere presence is enough to like lend some kind of validity to the role. I just wish we've seen him in two movies now, and I don't feel like he did a whole lot in either of those two movies other than kind of look a little menacing.
Mhm.
Mhm.
But I feel like he's a legitimate actor, and I just wish they would use him more than just be like, well, we've got this guy, so clearly, these guys mean business.
Yeah, that was one of my issues with this movie, where I didn't feel like the supporting cast had a lot of moments to shine. I thought a lot of the mobster characters were just sort of very stock in the way they were written, and they were all kind of the same character. more or less. Just like over the top caricatures of Italian mob guys. And then the ice cream guy, I mean, I'm not quite sure what the point of that character was. And then the little girl was just a typical precocious
Charlene.
young girl. Yeah, that was one of the issues for me, because I thought, like, with the humor, they could have just taken it a couple of steps further, and maybe that's just my juvenile self speaking. But like, imagine all these Italian mafioso guys like eating with chopsticks, with pushing a lazy Susan around, eating Chinese food and talking about like business. But I was expecting a scene like that, because like they don't really do anything with that whole. That's a joke. It's funny for like the first time you see it, but they don't kind of progress any of these setups that they introduce.
I
Yeah,
mean,
I could.
listen, watching fat guys go upstairs is never gonna get old to me though. Like the you know what I'm saying? Just like, why has he got to be on roofs? Think about you get that task from your boss. Like, this guy hides out in the rooftops in the city, so I want you to go to every rooftop in every building in this city. Meanwhile, you're a 250 pounds,
And
dude
also,
with
do you know the difference between someone black and a Puerto Rican and
and
a
a Puerto
Native
Rican.
American?
that was
But
that was that was good too.
you have this kind of played up level between Louis and Ghost Dog. And Louis says, "Me and him were from different ancient tribes, and now we're both almost extinct. But
Mhm.
sometimes you have to stick with the ancient ways, the old school ways. I know you understand me." And I think that that does provide a little bit of contrast between Louis as being this like person who's above the rank and file mobsters, and with this movie, it's like there's certain things that I do totally agree with, like especially when Telly was saying like they didn't stand out and it didn't lean in, but seeing how intentional so much of the movie is, I do wonder if some of that was played to do something else, where I think maybe it was to it felt like it was to amp Louis up as rising above the fray of all these disposable
Mhm.
mobsters. But
I mean, actually, I take a different take on that one scene. I feel like the way I read that was, so now Louis has to kill Ghost Dog in this moment. Why? Because Ghost Dog killed all of these other made men. And as part of the code that he has to follow, if you kill a made man, then you have to go. So even though he didn't want to kill Ghost Dog, because Ghost Dog was very useful to him and very loyal, he had to do it anyway because he had to follow that code.
yeah.
Um, and that's why Ghost Dog understood that. So
Mhm.
not because Louis didn't have to follow the code, he was okay with Louis doing it, A, because that was part of his code. He has to do whatever his boss says, seppuku if I tell you to.
Yeah.
But also B, I understand why you have to make this choice because it's part of the code, even though you don't want to. So it's okay for you to kill me because sometimes we have to revert back to the old ways.
Yeah, I guess because that's such a trope in like mob movies, where someone has to reluctantly kill another person that they care about or whatever. And I guess because the relationship between Louis and Ghost Dog is not really explored very deeply beyond the flashbacks, that final standoff at the end, I didn't feel any sort of emotional connection with the choices that they were forced to make.
What did you think of the passing of the torch from that scene? Because I think it does two things. One, it does set up Pearline as the
Mhm.
new ghost dog, but I didn't really realize it until this watch that it sets up Louise Vargo, the daughter, as the new capo.
Yeah.
Which
Mhm.
it's implied that Louis to Ghost Dog is that he's going to step up and be the new boss, and Louis says, "Not
I
exactly,
wish.
Ghost
Yeah.
Dog." And then the driver won't take off for Louis, but will take off for
Mhm.
Fargo's daughter. So, what do you guys think of the passing of the torch for this, like, Ghost Dog 2.0 of women led hitman slash Italian mob?
I didn't. I guess I wasn't emotionally invested enough to like. Okay, if they're gonna go off and do their thing. That's fine. I didn't. I don't think either of those characters are explored enough, where there's like your mind starts to race at the end, where you're like, oh, what's this gonna be like, right? With these two, doing the things that they're that other people were doing. So yeah, it didn't hit me. I guess at the end that it was like the pass any kind of passing of the torch. I mean, yes, it was. shown, but I wasn't like, oh shit, or anything like that.
Yeah.
I saw it. And I remember at the time watching it when it first came out. It really excited me. One thing that I noticed this time, I'm not sure that I noticed it last time, was I don't think she realized that there was no. When I saw it before, I thought that she realized that there was no gun, there was no clip in that gun,
Mhm.
and she was just like was saying something about kids, you know, with toy guns, right? But watching it this time, she didn't really see that he ejected the clip from that gun. That happens before she shows up.
Mhm.
So watching it now, it did occur to me that she actually meant to kill him.
Mhm.
She didn't realize that it wasn't just toy pew pew shooting. She would have killed him. And when I saw that, it kind of made me see the parallels between Perlene and Ghost Dog. And she sits up next to him and says, "Oh, they say that you don't have any friends." It doesn't seem like Perlene has any friends,
Yeah.
right? And she's if you look at the books that she's reading, they not really age appropriate for her. And then also the conversations, even though it's like one or two scenes, the conversations they had together, I think it did serve to drive home in a way that I didn't notice while I was watching how similar the two were to each other, and how it would make sense that he saw something in her that was kind of like himself, and how this is a type of person that could become a ghost dog,
Mm.
whether or not his intention was for her to do that or not. So I think it was a cool little bit to the movie. But in the other end of the spectrum, I don't think now watching it that it had the level of impact that maybe the director wanted it to have. And to Telly's point, I don't know that I would even necessarily be interested in watching a sequel where Perlene is now the hit, is now Ghost Dog, and we got a new mob boss.
Yeah, I think for me, the thing that I liked about that is just the open endedness, and it makes it feel a little bit like a world that continues after
The
the
movie
credits.
ends.
And I think a lot of that has to do with Jim Jarmusch's direction, just of his ability to portray a breathing world with minimalist things. I think like anytime that there were individual pieces of something that could tell a story being in the same frame, I feel like it was added to it to just give things color. So going from the way we were talking about the Crow and some parts of Dark City just lacking some of the extras in the background, I thought that this one portrayed the extras in a way that gave the city life. So you have
Trash
the
freestylers.
trash freestylers. Now you got your I think one of them might have been Superb
Yeah.
and from Theodore Unit. And when it comes to a lot of those moments, I thought that there was a all of these things together. Like there was a frame that I really liked when the mob people are trying to go inside the restaurant and they're talking about mob things, and you just have a couple of the takeout workers smoking cigarettes in the background, and it's just a subtle cue of just how different tribes and different groups of people and different backgrounds of how they interact with each other. And the same way you see this like pigeon shack that looks almost like a Japanese hut in Jersey City. There's a lot of juxtaposition between things that I think that the direction was well done, where it's minimal, but I thought it was effective. What did you think of the direction and presentation with some of the stuff?
The direction, it just reminded me of indie cinema in that period of time post Tarantino, where you have like quirky characters in a crime world. No one is really acting realistically to the situation. Like like the scene when they go on the roof and the Native American guys there, gun is being two guys pulling a gun on him, doesn't act like a normal person, right? And even
Oh,
at
well,
the
that's coming from a non-Puerto Rican Telly. You can't say
okay,
that.
what do you mean?
I'll take it from the Puerto Rican. Remember, they
Oh,
thought he was
that's how.
Puerto Rican,
Oh, okay.
and that's how most Puerto Ricans would have acted.
Oh, okay.
Stupid white man.
Yeah.
Go
So,
ahead. I'm sorry.
yeah, no, personally, I just didn't see anything remarkable in terms of the way it was directed. And again, I might be my thoughts, my criticism might be contaminated because of just other like hitman movies that I've seen that with similar characters. Because a lot of hitman movies are about a loner that sort of finds some kind of spiritual or emotional connection with something or someone. Um, but I thought it just felt very much like post Tarantino, wacky dialogue, wacky characters, behaving in a wacky way in a low budget movie.
I just want to say though, to that comparison about Hitman being loners and stuff, I think a lot of the, I don't want to say modern, but the post '60s Hitman movies that you might be alluding to, Telly, really do take homage to samurai movies. Again, especially the Ronin genre, right, where it's
Mhm.
just like the lonely road of an assassin. So to me, that made sense. As far as direction is concerned, I'm kind of two minds. Where I wasn't before when I first saw it back in the day. This movie, they it could do no wrong. Every cell of this movie was pure perfection for me. Watching it again, and now I watched it twice because I think that maybe watching it with my mom will skew it a little bit because you're also focused on the other person and how they're reacting to the movie. So I watched it again today alone to just re evaluate it by myself and see how I felt. So on the one hand, I think there are things in here that are pure genius. Little things like a lot of times the cartoons these people would watch would mimic the way he was about to kill that person, right? So the dude was watching a cartoon, and in the cartoon, a dude shoots a gun up a pipe, and it goes through the shower and rains bullets down, and the very next kill match that.
Yeah.
I do think there was a lot of storytelling. You're right, in the scenery and in the background. However, conversely, there were some things that I didn't notice before, and I didn't know why they he did this until you kind of described this earlier. To your point, Ghost Dog, is that there's a lot of just watching him drive around the fucking city and watching him walk around the neighborhood and watching birds fly over the city, right? And I know that if you look, for example, at something like Shogun Assassin, there's an entire scene where he's in a tub, right? He's bathing, and the steam, and it's slowly panning past his face. But at the end of that sequence, there's a ninja that fucking flies down and tries to chop his head off, right? And so there's these slow pans to emote how lonely the main character is, but also as a setup, a psychological setup for some payoff that's going to happen. And I feel like the direction that he took, again, it's great for a music video. It's nothing cooler than listening to Nas while driving down the street with the top down, with Nas blasting, and that's great for a music video. But for this movie, I just felt it just felt boring. And now, I didn't know why he put it in there. It makes sense now after hearing you at Dash and earlier mention that it's a kind of a tribute to the samurai movies. There are a lot of those slow panning shots, but in this movie, I just did not feel it was effective. The intro sequence above the city with the credits runs way too long. Then it pans down, and no one talks, and then you do get a message from the book, and that's cool. But then it's just him driving around. And the first time you see him driving around the city, he doesn't even wind up going anywhere to like kill anybody. So I just it was it just it got boring and it felt artsy for the sake of artsy. And there was no like payoff for it. So I looked at it and I took a note here. It's almost a full hour. It's an hour. Sorry, 55 minutes. 55 minutes before you get the setup that the mob is coming after him for that hit.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
that's 55 minutes of credits, of birds flying, of him driving around, of him walking through the city. He does kill somebody, which kind of starts things in motion. But by the time you get what the internal conflict of the main conflict of the movie is, you've already almost lost an hour.
Yeah. So.
And so the storytelling I thought was great, but his delivery, I think
Mhm.
what he was trying to go for was ineffective, and I found it plotting and long.
Yeah, Carlos, that was what was confusing for me because I know he was going for like a this was a homage to samurai movies from back in the day, but in those movies, as you referenced, and I think Takeshi Kitano, Pete Takeshi, whatever, captures is that there is that sudden violence, those bursts of like shocking cathartic violence that happen, and there is some payoff for all that slow burn where that was completely missing. I thought in this movie. So that's where I was just kind of confused because obviously this is a tribute to people that love cinema and those movies from back in the day, and even some of those scenes are referenced, but he doesn't really sort of capture the essence of some of those films and the style of those movies. So that's where I was just kind of confused what what Jim Jarmusch was trying to do.
I think it was really cool how they were using. I'm not sure if it was meant to be an homage or not, but when he was practicing on the rooftop, they did that blur cam thing,
Yeah,
and I
yeah.
find it reminiscent of the Bruce Lee.
Oh,
He's doing
the
the
million
whole,
hands, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I thought that was a nice little technique again to
I
like.
thought it was just
Clearly,
to
we're not
kind of
going to see.
cover up the fact that Forrest Whitaker
Yeah,
probably didn't know how to
they
do
can't.
that stuff because
Yeah, yeah,
that was
yeah.
also
But it was the
bizarre to
cool.
me that he wasn't killing people with the sword,
Yeah.
especially at the end. I thought he would go in and at the
You mean
end
in the mansion?
I was starting, yeah, exactly that
Mhm.
when yeah, it wasn't at the end. It's still like a half an hour after that, but a movie after that. But yeah, I thought he would go in with the sword blazing and everything. And actually, at that point, it started to remind me a lot of the Thomas Jane Punisher movie because it's like the mob, and then he goes in on a rampage inside the mansion. So
Overall, this movie I think had a lot of really cool themes, and one of them I felt like goes really with what we're doing here on the podcast, and it's really doing things the old way. And did any of you watch this and feel like any of it resonating as we're like Telly with the background filled with DVDs and cases? We're talking about old movies. I have a Blu-ray collection myself. What did you guys think of the whole theme of these characters who are like, the dying breed of a transitioning world that just kind of want to keep what they know alive?
well, those scenes with like the CDs and the VHS tapes and everything, that just reminded me that this movie's 25 years old, and 25 years is a long time. But I
Yeah.
guess
Mhm.
we're at that age where it's like it's a drop in the bucket at this point. So yeah, I mean, to think that this is a quarter century old, and I remember reading the reviews. It feels like it was only a couple of years ago that I was reading the reviews when this came out. Because
Mhm.
Artisan, I was looking it up on Wikipedia. Artisan released that, and Artisan's not around anymore. Um, but that was the thing that struck me, is just how much time has passed. Yeah, because we were talking about Jersey City, and Jersey City looks completely different now. Um, but yeah, I like movies that sort of like look back and try to embrace like the classic ways. I think that's also a theme in a lot of Hitman movies, that code of honor that
Mhm.
that no longer exists in the modern world, and the hitman, the samurai, or the assassin, whatever you want to call them, is sort of a relic of the past.
Yeah. So I agree 100%. One thing that occurred to me initially, just even watching the movie again, I went and got the Criterion edition of this film, and so if you know anything about the Criterion guys, they will go back and they will take the original film print. I mean, it's 1080p on the Blu-ray, but it's taken from a brand new 4K master that they did. Which was approved by Jim Jarmusch, and so there's a certain level of expectation when you throw in one of these movies. And the first thing that occurred to me actually was, I'm not sure if it was the film grain, if it was the lighting, if it was the film stock that they used, but it didn't look like a 1999 movie to me. The first couple of shots, the over the city shots, him walking through the neighborhood, to me looked much more like a 80s. It looked like it was shot in the 80s style. Um, and again, I don't know if it's the lighting or what, but there were so many. The cartoons that they were watching weren't current 99 cartoons. They were old school cartoons, right? And so throughout the film, this guy's, using some kind of hacking device to be able to get into these cars. And even it looked like he used it on like an old car. He used it on the gate for the like an old style gate. So there was definitely a whole lot of mashups of the old and the new, even down to again characters, right? If you're gonna look at Ghost Dog and you're gonna look at Perline, right? It's gonna be the old way, and then a new kid sitting on her mother's floor. That's gonna be the next generation. But so he's trying to teach her the old methods. So I definitely think as a theme that's pretty well expressed, and I think he did do a good job in presenting that theme.
And I think the music also really helped that along as well with this is the first movie credit for Wu-Tang Clan starter the RZA, and
And
his
you can tell instantly his sound, like even in the credits, the menu intro, which is the also like I guess it's the Ghost Dog theme when
yeah.
he's walking. As soon as you hear that, it's
Yeah.
the RZA, and there's no question it's the RZA. Um, and and he's even doing I think it's like Thelonious Monk at one point that he
Mhm.
listens to in the car. Having said that, I just felt like there's some better RZA beats.
Yeah.
Like some of the choices, like RZA's got some real classics in there, and you can tell it's uniquely RZA. But I feel like he's got way better beats.
Yeah,
I
I
like
think
that they
he
were freestyling over Cream though. I'm sorry, go
yeah,
ahead.
that was dope, and it's sometimes with movies, anytime there's hip hop, I feel like it dates it, but it's like some stuff that is just such a negative for other films. I think was a positive for this one. With it, totally dates it to a late '90s hip hop movie, and like you said earlier, that this movie was kind of like geared for you. I think like just lining up with my interest at that time, the RZA
Absolutely,
doing the music was just like the perfect topping
draw.
point. And then if you like, there are a lot of affiliate members, so like the guys freestyling at the park, they're from
Yeah,
an offset of Wu-Tang. You have
yeah,
a part where Al Green's playing, which is the sample, and is interesting. Just the way that the music is layered in is very similar to the influences of different movies laid in, and it really shows like a kind of philosophy of directing, of just how the characters are portrayed, is how the music is portrayed, is how the city's portrayed, and whether you like it or don't like it, there definitely was like a clear vision that was put forward, and whether it
absolutely.
was achieved or not, I definitely always appreciate when someone is taking some sort
Shot.
of chance. Or this movie does feel like some stuff I think is a little bit heavy handed, not subtle, maybe even a little bit clunky, but it does feel like wow, whoever made this that had something to say.
Yeah, for me, the music, I take a slightly different, to have a slightly different take because I feel like the music and what I'm seeing on screen didn't sort of coalesce the way, like movies in the 80s where you take that song out of that scene, the scene doesn't work anymore. Or you just, every time you hear that song, you're thinking of that scene
But
in
are
the
you a hip
movie.
hop fan, Telly? Do you
I
like
am a
Wu Tang?
casual hip hop fan. I think my favorite group from
Okay,
that period was Two Live Crew. So it's a completely different
that's a
style,
way
obviously.
different. Yeah,
So
that's way different.
Two
Okay,
Live Crew. So
okay.
yeah, very different than RZA and those guys and the Wu Tang guys. But yeah, I just didn't feel like like the scenes of him driving. You could put another song on there, and it would have kind of played out the same way. You think of a movie like Drive, and you feel like that music and those shots and everything kind of just all came together. And I don't know if that's like, I consider it. Is it the fault of the editor? Is it maybe Jim Jarmusch wasn't a hip hop fan and didn't really feel the vibe of the music and understand how to kind of match it with what was on screen? But
I think he
but that
just
was for
gave
me.
it to RZA and was like, "Hey
Yeah,
RZA,
that's what
do
it
do
felt like
you?"
to me, where it's like, okay, just
And
add
RZA was
music
like,
to
"Got
this,
it."
where it's not like it didn't feel like, yeah, the visuals and the music really were like made for each other.
And that comparison to Drive is a really good, because that's a movie that I would consider like maybe not indie, but it feels indie, right?
Mhm,
Like it feels like a very stylized, and that's a really good example of something that really does work cohesively
mhm.
with the aesthetics, especially the music of setting the tone, because there's not that much that like when you hear the Kaczynski track and you're like,
Mhm.
oh shit, like this feels like a synth punk kind of vaporwave
Yeah,
movie, where aside from Ghost Dog being black and the freestylers being black,
yeah.
that's like the Wu-Tang thread into into it. So that was really good. But that was a good take. But yeah, this isn't one of the more action based movies for a shoot punch kick podcast, but I'm gonna count it because it's within our time period and there's
Oh,
guns.
absolutely.
So overall, I mean, in the movie, it's not the most action packed, but do want to ask you, do you think Ghost Dog is a good assassin?
I can jump in and say, yeah, absolutely. Even based on his jacket, he told, I think at one point when he was describing him to his bosses, he said it was 11 kills. No
Mhm.
one has been seen. He had some interesting manners by which he did kill. He did the whole put the piece of tape over the glass so
Yeah.
that when he shot through it, it wouldn't make noise. The shooting through the pipe thing, although completely impractical and completely ridiculous, because how would he know that it was exactly the time that he would be standing over there? He couldn't see up it. I think he's even closed his eyes. It's still a really cool
Yeah.
image and a really cool concept. And he showed up next to Louis in that sidewalk before he knew it. The gun was already to his head.
Mhm.
He went in there and killed a bunch of people in the mansion pretty easily. I don't think he even got really hurt. I would say he was. I would say yes, absolutely. I think he's a good assassin.
So if I was hiring an assassin, I don't think I would hire Ghost Dog. Too much collateral damage. Didn't cover his footprints very well. Like
Mhm.
robbing the two people of their clothes. They're gonna have a description of him. Changing the license plates right in front of a crowd of people.
Mm.
Things like that. Which yeah. So I know they were setting him up as this like brilliant assassin in the first half of the movie, but he seems to get very careless, or maybe some of those details just didn't matter in the second half of the movie. Like, he randomly
That's what I'm
steals that
saying.
the convertible.
But none of that came back to bite him, right? So like
Yeah,
the proof is in the pudding.
right. But in terms of like, if you're an assassin and he's so meticulous in terms of what he's doing, you don't want to waste your energies on something that's not going to help you. So. But in terms of the actual killing, yes, he was efficient. He did what he needed to do. He just didn't. I just thought he didn't cover his tracks very well. But again,
Why did he? Why
I've
did he
never
steal
hired
the
an assassin,
dress?
so I don't know what
Why did he steal the dress? He stole the
he
guy's
needed. A
suit,
guy's suit
but why did he steal the girl's dress?
because
See
Because he wanted
some.
to see them titties.
Yeah.
no, she's not
I don't
Ghost
abroad.
think
Dog.
that's why I would have did. You know what I'm saying?
The
No. You too,
samurai.
honey. You too.
Chapter 23. The samurai got to get his too. This movie came out March 3rd, 2000, or released, premiered in Cannes in 1999. So it is celebrating its 25th year. But this movie opened in 34th place. So I don't think any of us supported it. On the week of, The Whole Nine Yards was the number one movie.
Adam
Also,
Sandler.
there, My Dog Skip, Pitch Black,
Pitch
Reindeer
Black.
Oh,
Games,
pitch black.
American Beauty,
America. Well, he won an
Okay.
Oscar for that.
Scream 3, and Boiler Room at 16th.
The year of Vin Diesel.
Yeah, he was he
Yeah, he
was
had a serious year.
really doing it. And this
Coffee's the
movie
closers.
this movie is an 84 on Rotten Tomatoes. I was surprised. Friend of the show, Roger Ebert, gives it 3 stars. He
Mm.
says it helps to understand that the hero of Ghost Dog, the way of the samurai, is crazy. Well, of course he is. He lives in a shack on a rooftop with his pigeons. He dresses like a homeless man. Jarmusch is mixing styles here almost recklessly, and I like the chances he takes. So, Roger Ebert, fan of the bold.
I just kept thinking though, if this movie came out today, where you have a white director making a movie about a black lead character who is appropriating Asian culture, how
Mm.
would that be received by today's standards? Not that I would have any issue with that, but it's just interesting where 25 years ago that wasn't something where people are going to be protesting and writing opinion pieces about. But I think it would be perceived by certain people as problematic if it came out today.
Well, there is some going on right now with Ubisoft, who's doing an
Mhm.
Assassin's Creed game with Yosuke, the Black Samurai, and there was just a Netflix show based on the
Mhm.
same
That's
character,
Yesuke.
which gets some of the same criticism. criticism, right or wrong. So yeah, there would definitely be some hot takes going on
I
on
mean, the three of us were
Yeah,
at a Shogun at the FX Shogun screening, and one of the points that they were emphasizing was that one of the showrunners was a Japanese woman, the wife of Justin Marks, and emphasizing that okay, this is not just a bunch of white guys making a show about feudal Japan. So
Mhm.
I think yeah, things have definitely changed in culture and in the arts in the last like 2 decades and
I
a half.
I actually I think I beg to differ only because this movie so oozes the hip hop culture, the hip hop vibe, especially the Wu Tang vibe, which already melds, right? Like, so Wu Tang could release an album today and start every song with a clip from a Shaw Brothers intro, and we'll at least the fans will eat it up. So
Hmm.
yeah, it was a white director, and yes, there was a black person appropriating Asian culture, but that at least from the mainstream, even then as well as today, Wu Tang can do that. Like
Yeah.
I feel like Wu Tang is loved more in Asia now, probably than the Wu Tang is loved in America. So it's an appropriation, but with a deep respect and love. And it's funny because so if you could say that the Wu Tang is appropriating Asian culture, but in Asia, with them all wearing Wu Tang shirts and rapping those lines, they're taking black culture,
Yeah, no, that's
right?
not a
So it's
criticism.
kind of
I
like
don't care about any of that stuff. I'm just
no,
saying,
no,
like a critic like
but to your point about
Roger
today,
Ebert.
hold
Yeah.
on, but to your point today, would that be
Mhm.
acceptable? The answer is yes, because I feel like the Asian black thing isn't going to be an issue because that's been a connection for the last 30 years of hip hop since the Wu Tang has been around. And yes, you have a white director, but this film oozes hip hop so much that close your eyes and there's no, you wouldn't tell. I didn't necessarily even at the time realize that it was a white director. I think because of RZA's touching over it and the music and the vibe and the theme of, again, there's a large black
Yeah.
community out there in love with samurai films,
Yeah.
and so it feels authentic.
Yeah, I guess my
So I would
point.
say I don't think it
So
would be
my
a problem
point, I guess,
today.
because of Roger Ebert's name triggered me because it is Jim Jarmusch who both wrote and directed this. So
Yeah.
I just feel like someone like him, who's so sanctimonious, and if this movie came out now and he was still alive, if he would be criticizing Jim Jarmusch,
Of
saying
him,
like why this should be a black director directing this movie about a black hero and in a black neighborhood, blah 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 blah. And I think if it's art, anyone could do whatever they want. But I just wonder if someone like him by today, if he was alive today, if he would be attacking that movie for those reasons.
I mean, I can look for any reason these
Yeah.
days, right?
And
People
also,
will
I
just be
guess it's like
offended.
one of the last genres that you can do that with is Asian culture.
Hmm.
So you have Kill Bill, Everything Everywhere has a non-Asian director.
Well, one of them,
What
yeah.
was the Doctor Strange? You had white Tibetan monk
Right.
going in. So
That was a big that
that was,
specifically I know
but it
was
was
a
still,
controversy.
but it was still out there. So there would probably be some sort
Ghost in
of,
the Shell was a big one.
Yeah.
Remember with that was
yeah.
a problem.
So there would probably be some think pieces, but I don't think it would slow anyone down.
Mhm.
What was you guys' favorite scene from the movie?
Tell you,
Carlos. Oh,
I'll go.
I like the ending. No, not the ending. I like the mansion invasion.
For me, it's gonna be the same one that it was even 25 years ago when I first saw it, which is the assassination through the sink,
Mhm.
Okay.
and the mobster rapping Flavor Flav. I love it.
For me, the training on the roof. I think that was just the really big like character moment of Ghost Dog where you're just like, damn, this dude is cool as fuck. Like, I think that when you have like the Shaolin, people doing like the katas and stuff, like just anytime Ghost Dog is by himself, I thought was just like, damn, this motherfucker's cool. Like
So
he just sits laying on the floor reading, like
contemplating.
oil, filling up his
Around pigeon shit,
silencer.
yeah. But
Yeah,
but
doing like,
again, but like so that was my question is like we talked about Chekhov's gun like a couple episodes back, but like he's doing the sword thing on the roof and they don't bring that back. He never uses the sword later.
yeah. Yeah, he should have. He definitely should have brought that sword out because he did this
Mhm.
one move where he was like
Yeah, yeah,
that was like
yeah,
the I
yeah,
wanted to see that
yeah.
like in action
In
off
action.
of
Oh
a
yeah.
head. Especially the guy who talks like this. What are you gonna do? You whacked him. You whacked him.
Yeah.
Um, so overall, this is the part of the movie or the part of the podcast where we assign a rating using a 5-star system, using half stars included, and we talk about the movie. So, anybody want to go first? I can go first.
You start.
All
Go
right,
ahead, buddy.
so this is a movie I nominated. I have been watching this movie from back in the day. As you can probably tell from this movie, I'm very high on it. So I'm gonna give Ghost Dog: Way of the Samurai 5 Sonny Valerios out of 5. This movie has just came out at the right point of time in my life and is a mixture of a lot of things that really mattered to me, and just the way that the movie is, you can look into it if you want to. Like, it's that open ended to, inspire discussion, second thoughts about it. And over time, like, it's not like lost or anything where I have like notebooks filled with notes, but there are certain things in the movie where I just themes that I relate to, stuff that I just thought about, and how characters reacted. And so I'm going with a 5 out of 5.
And that makes a lot of sense because to some degree, man, you are a black man in America obsessed with Asian culture, especially Japanese culture. I get it.
Mhm.
I was
I get
seen.
it.
I was seen.
You felt seen. I loved this movie when it came out. Again, I was a demographic it was aiming for, and if you would have asked me at the time, this would have been a 4 or 4.5 out of 5. Watching it now, and that may have been to the detriment of this because I held it in such a high esteem and such a high pedestal that I was expecting once again to be blown away by it the same way I was when I was younger, but that definitely didn't happen. So I'm sad to say I still really enjoyed it. I'm glad I own it in my collection because it's a part of my past. And I will watch it again. But for me, it dropped down to 3 carrier pigeons out of 5.
Mm.
Okay. Yeah, so for me, I'm a big Hitman movie guy. My two favorite Hitman movies are The Killer, John Woo's The Killer, and The Mechanic with Charles Bronson. And actually, there's a lot of themes in The Mechanic that are in Ghost Dog. And also, huge fan of The Last Dragon. And I think because of that, it really colored sort of my perspective on this movie. But overall, it was well done. But I don't. Again, I was just kind of confused what Jim Jarmusch was trying to do with this movie or trying to say with this movie. So I'm gonna have to give it 2.5 murdered pigeons out of 5.
So
Yeah, why
that's
didn't they? Why didn't the pigeons just fly away? Like when they killed
I
all of
think
them.
Victor
Usually,
Argo
you'd kill the
grabbed them
first
or
pigeon. They
something. Yeah, that seems to be
like,
his
how did you
talent in
kill
the
all
movie.
those? He,
those are
he did the Red
samurai
Dead Redemption.
Yeah,
pigeons. They
That's
don't they
right. They
don't
just took
run.
it.
They're just like, you know what?
They
maybe
just
he
We
sent
we
lured
it
have
them
a
in
all
with
message.
food,
stoic.
so they do have small brains.
So that's Ghost Dog: Way of the Samurai. Thanks for watching it and talking about it with your boys at the Shoot Punch Kick podcast. Now I'm going to kick it over to Carlos to nominate next week's film.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. So for our next film, I decided to pick a movie that scared the crap out of me when I was a kid, and I haven't seen since. And I hope you guys enjoyed as well. I'm picking the 1989 Wes Craven joint Shocker. Um, and again, in the trailer for Shocker, it says that this is Wes Craven's best creation, which is high praise because I love me some Wes Craven. So please join us next week while we review Shocker. Thank you so much for joining us today. Please like, comment, subscribe, and also leave some comments. We'd really appreciate a conversation. Get started. We want to engage with you guys. If you have any recommendations, don't be afraid to throw them in the chat. We've already done one episode due to a recommendation, and we'd love to do more. So for me and my boys, Shoot, Punch, Kick, I'm Carlos.
You know who we are.
We're out.